A massive crowd is cheering in Milwaukee, waiting to hear from the former president. As Theodore Roosevelt steps out of his car, a man pushes through the throng, raises a .38 caliber revolver, and fires directly into Roosevelt's chest at point-blank range. The bullet tears through his heavy winter coat, a steel eyeglasses case, and a 50-page speech folded in his pocket, before lodging squarely against his ribs. Roosevelt staggers, coughs to check if he's bleeding into his lungs, and turns back to the terrified crowd. "It takes more than that to kill a bull moose," he tells them. Then, with the bullet still buried near his heart, he stands at the podium and delivers a 90-minute speech. Modern Americans tend to look at the architects of the United States through a lens of polished reverence. We see faces carved into mountains and stamped onto coins, frozen as icons entirely separated from human frailty. The actual creation of the country was far more visceral. The men steering the American experiment suffered agonizing illnesses, absorbed literal gunfire, and pushed their bodies to the absolute brink of failure to secure the nation's survival. They bypassed the comfort of the desk to fight an exhausting war against their own physical vulnerability, projecting the raw strength a fragile public demanded. That bulletproof bravado Roosevelt displayed came from a lifetime of extreme discipline. As a young boy, he was severely asthmatic and so physically weak that he spent most of his days confined to his bed, struggling just to draw a breath. Advised by his father that he had to build his body to support his mind, he threw himself into a grueling regimen. He spent years lifting heavy weights, boxing, and hiking mountains to manually construct the rugged endurance that would define his public image. Andrew Jackson took that tolerance for physical trauma even further. Years before taking office, he stepped onto a dueling round, absorbed a direct gunshot to the chest, calmly returned fire, and walked away, carrying that lead ball in his chest cavity for the rest of his life. He channeled that stubborn refusal to die on the battlefield. During the War of 1812, Jackson took command of a disorganized militia and completely routed a heavily armed British force twice their size at the Battle of New Orleans. To a public living on a violent, shifting frontier, a leader's ability to survive a bullet or outwork a disease served as a proxy for the stability of the state itself. If the man couldn't be broken by physical trauma, the nation he led might prove just as durable. Later leaders faced a different kind of physical battlefield. In 1921, Franklin Delano Roosevelt contracted polio. The disease ravaged his nervous system and paralyzed his legs, leaving him permanently unable to walk unassisted. To project an image of vigor, Roosevelt locked his dead weight into heavy, painful steel braces. He gripped podiums with immense upper body strength, balancing his entire frame through muscle tension and force of will. He orchestrated this agonizing daily deception because the country was in freefall. With unemployment hitting 25% during the Great Depression, thousands waiting in breadlines, and the economy collapsing, Americans needed an unshakable pillar of stability. Out of the public eye, he rebuilt the nation's infrastructure and overhauled American manufacturing. He directed the conversion of civilian factories into a massive wartime engine, building the planes, tanks, and ships that eventually secured victory in the Second World War. Roosevelt's true strength lay in this silent, exhausting war against his own body, a sacrifice made so the American public would never see the weakness they feared. George Washington's supreme test required holding a freezing, starving, shoeless army of farmers together for 8 years against the wealthiest military force on the planet, enduring brutal winters at Valley Forge and pulling off impossible maneuvers in freezing snowstorms. His most remarkable act of endurance happened after the war was won, when his officers urged him to seize absolute king-like control over the new country. He simply said no. He surrendered his commission and walked away to go home. Decades later, Abraham Lincoln absorbed an unimaginable psychological toll. He took office as the country ripped itself apart, bearing the daily weight of a civil war that claimed over 600,000 American lives. He faced massive public pressure to quit and let the Union dissolve, but he refused to yield. Just 5 days after the Confederate surrender secured the nation's survival, Lincoln paid the ultimate physical price when an assassin fired a bullet into the back of his head. The scope of his sacrifice triggered a staggering wave of public mourning. As his funeral train rolled across the country, millions lined the tracks in absolute silence for the man who saved the Union but would never live to see it rebuilt. Through absolute restraint and ultimate consequence, both men proved that keeping the American experiment intact required abandoning personal ego, and in Lincoln's case, giving his life. These grand monuments stand as massive stone receipts for unimaginable personal sacrifice. They show us that genuine leadership demands the resolve to keep moving forward, when yielding to pain, exhaustion, or despair is the rational option. These were entirely human men who answered history's call by weaponizing whatever they had left in their minds and bodies. The United States rests on a foundation of managed sickness, internal bleeding, and a refusal to yield when the body failed. Which of these stories of brutal resilience shocked you the most? Let me know down in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden history of the